Hello, everybody, and good evening, and welcome to this conversation on digital safety for Web3. Thank you so much for being here, and especially thank you to people who are coming for a second time. Having booked previously, we rescheduled the last date due to the National Industrial Action, so thank you for supporting us with that. It's great that we can finally be together as a community this evening. And I'm really excited for this event. I wanted to say a quick thank you to CCI and the events team. These events are always the result of multiple people coming together behind the scenes. So thank you to Eunice and Georgina for coordinating everything, and to Connor for the visuals, and to Cecile, who's going to be moderating behind the scenes this evening. Thank you so much to everyone. I am absolutely personally thrilled to be able to have this conversation with two women that I admire very much and who have personally inspired me a lot in my own work, and I will be introducing them very shortly. But first, just wanted to mention that we do want this event to be as interactive as it can be online, and we ask you to, or we invite you to share questions in the YouTube chat if you have anything that you would like to ask our panelists. If you would like to ask questions on a different platform that's more private, you can also ask questions in Slido, and Cecile will be posting a link to that in the YouTube chat. We do, in the spirit of this event, ask kindly that any questions you share are respectful and considerate towards our panelists. We really want to create a safe and welcoming environment for everybody to learn and share their ideas, and we want to encourage open and honest discussion, and really what supports that is being mindful about what we put out there, and the panelists do reserve the right to just answer questions that feel appropriate. If you want to catch up on the event afterwards, you will be able to watch it back on YouTube, and there will be closed captions along with that. So I will, without further ado, introduce our fabulous speakers. So firstly, we have Dr. Ronda Zelezny-Green. Ronda is a digital change maker who is creating social learning systems to empower technology and to empower Black people, women, people with disabilities, and other marginalised populations in the technology and education sectors. Ronda has also got extensive experience delivering action-oriented training that integrates the themes of racial equity and justice and gender with global perspectives. And hallmarks of her career include learning and educating with tech and data, championing, coaching and mentoring women in tech and data, and empowering people to use technology as transformative tools to live their best lives. So thank you and welcome, Ronda.
Thank you so much, Charlotte.
We also have with us this evening Seyi Akiwowo. Seyi is a multi-award-winning founder and CEO of Glitch, which is a charity that's been on a mission to end online abuse by making digital citizens of us all since 2017. Before Glitch, Seyi was elected as the youngest Black female councillor in East London at the age of 23. And it was when she experienced online abuse whilst in that position that Seyi decided to set up Glitch to help support women and marginalised communities in an ever-changing online world. In true millennial style, Seyi is also an international speaker, including TEDx. She's a respected consultant and writer within the political and tech space. And she is Penguin published author of How to Stay Safe Online, everyone. Which is
Excellent.
a digital self-care toolkit for developing resilience and allyship. And recently, Seyi was offered an MBE, but made the decision not to take it while still proudly celebrating the achievement herself. Welcome, Seyi, and thank you so much for being here.
Anytime, Charlotte, you know, you're one of my faves.
All right, so the only other thing that I wanted to say as a sort of slight framing is, you know, we are here to talk about digital safety and sort of imagining the possibilities for architecting new visions of that. in the context of an ever-changing internet. And I was just reflecting on how even since we wrote the event description for this, things have changed lots. You know, there are constant developments in this space. Things are always changing. And I just wanted to really acknowledge that we're having this conversation in a pretty profoundly momentous time that I think we're going to look back on in a couple of years' time or decades' time and have a different perspective. And personally, I am finding it quite hard to make sense of everything that's changing so quickly. And so I am very, very grateful to be guided by you both, always, but especially in times like this. So anyway, I thought we could maybe start by, if you could share, you know, some of the things that you're working on and also why working on digital safety is really important to you.
Great, I'll start because I know Seyi's done substantial, excellent work in this area publicly, and a lot of mine has kind of been behind the scenes. So first of all, I'm such a fan of Seyi, so I'm honored to be on a panel with her and likewise with you, Charlotte. And I think that for me, a lot of the work that I've done in digital safety has actually been from a private sector perspective. So as recently as just last year, I was consulting for a major corporation that shall not be named, who kind of inspired this conversation that we're having today. And the thing that we were working on was an intersectional framework related to content moderation, digital safety, and so forth. And so we had senior people in the room. People were championing the work that was led by the main person at this corporation that had commissioned the input. And, you know, just like that, I mean, the tech sector has been changing dramatically overnight. And so the things that I've been doing in the past have related to that. So prior to that particular consulting engagement, I've worked at the Internet Society and at the GSMA, and in the GSMA in particular, spent a lot of time working with mobile network operators and helping them to think through things like child online protection. And so it's quite interesting because when I was doing that at the time, I was not a mother, and people would constantly say, well, you're not a parent, so how can you tell us about child safety online? And I was like, well, because if you're not having conversations with your children, someone else is. So you can, you know, decide not to do that, bury your head in the sand. But that's not actually going to help anything. So I feel, you know, my perspective and approach, you know, in this kind of consulting work with the private sector has been knowledge is power, but you have to move intersectionally. So one of the things that I've specialized, you know, whether from my employer or through consulting, has been, you know, focused on how do you do digital safety in an intersectional manner, considering, you know, various different identities that someone might encompass, and what that means when you're online. And, you know, I've been so inspired by, you know, going all the way back to 2011 when Black women as ever were the canary in the coal mine about a lot of issues related to safety, security, blackface online, with regards to, you know, now former President Donald Trump, and, you know, seeing the Russian propaganda that was beginning at that time and blatantly calling it out and not being listened to. And so one of the things that I try to do separate from, you know, these paid engagements is I'm a co-editor along with Miss Alex Tyers of the Gender and Mobile newsletter. And in that newsletter, we're regularly cataloging the good, the bad, and the ugly as it relates to digital safety products and services that are marketed specifically for women. And so with this, you know, we've been doing this newsletter now for over 10 years, and our readership continues to grow. And we're just grateful to have the opportunity to point out these things, because for me, I'm learning like, oh, this could actually be useful. But most of the times I'm just like, I can't believe you thought that would keep women safe. So that's me. That's what I've done. And I'll pass the mic now to Seyi.
Lovely to always hear about other people doing amazing work in the ecosystem. We need our people on the front line. We need our people who are working with tech companies. We need people who are working with government. We need everybody in this ecosystem if we truly want to make systemic change. So thank you for the work that you do and have been doing for a long time. And I'm giving you your flowers because I know when you're working behind the scenes, it can be like, does no one know?
Stressful.
I hear you. I hear you. So what have we been up to? Well, today I'm wearing a football shirt, which is very unlike me. It's because we have launched at Glitch our campaign with EE, who's a telephone provider, mobile provider, broadband provider. There are quite a lot of things in the UK, and with BT, and it's about the online safety bill in the UK. And we're glad to be working with a huge company like EE and BT again, to make sure that women and girls are front and center when we're talking about digital safety, and making sure when we're talking about the online safety bill, it is future proofed. Because when we were talking about this bill now 6 years ago, when it was called the Online Harms Bill, and saw through many prime ministers and government ministers, TikTok hadn't really kicked off and been a thing then. And so we really want to make sure when we're looking at keeping women and girls safe, we're having a risk assessment approach to that from a gendered lens and an intersectional lens actually at the heart of that, and making sure when products and platforms by tech companies, big and small, are being created, they're having gender at mind at the very beginning, and then they're doing their content moderation, updates, and transparency reports, analysis with a gendered and intersectional lens, rather than what we feel that is happening with the likes of Andrew Tate and the likes of people being allowed back on the platform thanks to Elon Musk. We're feeling that this is whack-a-mole rather than a systemic approach and a lens to how online safety for women needs to be. And that's making sure it's future-proof. If we are so specific about text-based platforms, we're going to miss video and audio and what it means for other forms of the web. And I think by having that named in the bill, which is what this campaign is about, because 262 pages currently exist for this online safety bill, and women and girls are not mentioned. What that says is women and girls aren't important. What that says and signals to multi-billion-pound corporations is that you can continue to keep working fast, breaking things and apologizing later, and letting gender-based violence like examples like a new TikTok trend where men are putting hex codes under women's videos in the comment section, trying to guess the colors of their private parts. If we don't have our government leaders naming gender-based violence, people are going to keep thinking that this is an unintended consequence that profits at the expense of women. And we know that that is 84% more likely, abuse is more likely for Black women. So that's the one thing that we're working on today. The second thing I want to say at Glitch that we're working on is an upcoming report looking at misogynoir online. Misogynoir is a term coined by Dr. Moya Bailey. Shout out to her and all her flowers. And I'm so appreciative of that terminology to understand how race and gender intersect and interplay and cause compounding harms, and how we're seeing the same tactic happening online, and how tech is weaponized disproportionately against Black women. And so we're looking at this report, with the first report of its kind that is looking at 4 plebs, that's looking at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and early indications show, it will be out next month, early indications show that the content that Black women receive is violent by vast more than what white women receive. And the tactics that are used to be violent towards Black women also then venture into things like anti-Semitism, the worry about, the white race theory of like white people being extinct and all of that. It lends itself to so many other forms of harm. That is why it's so important to have an intersectional framework, because if you look at the most minoritized, the ones that are left behind, that's how you can create an architect for safe online spaces. And the idea, and I've said this challenge to Sir Berners-Lee. Charlotte, you know me. Ronda, you know me. I've said it. You created the platform thinking that it was going to be this free web, the World Wide Web, and people are going to do it. And that's really nice. It was so, in the 80s with SMS, with dial-up, it was so predictable, the harms that were going to happen on the web. And we are too slow at circumventing it. And focusing on misogyny is not only the right thing to do and the moral thing to do, but it's actually an economical thing to do. And we hope that report conveys that. And then just finally, I am continuing to talk about my book, How to Stay Safe Online, and trying to mainstream the issue, because I am sick and tired of people telling me that this issue is niche when we know it's not. We know how it affects children. We know how it affects parents. We know it's breaking down families. How many more testimonials or case studies are we going to be hearing about how families have been split up because people have been groomed by Andrew Tate and his minions? This is having an impact on our democracies, having an impact on innovation and women's freedom of expression. And I'm really glad that this book has allowed me to keep mainstreaming this conversation, so it's not just a thing that people think is happening to celebrities or happening to famous people. It's happening every single day. I've spoken for 3-4 minutes. Every 30 seconds, a woman is abused on Twitter. This is really an urgent call for action.
And I want to add, because as you were speaking, Seyi, particularly when you talked about Black women, I'm collaborating as well with Dr. Kui McKee, who's a researcher, and my sister friend in BRK Ujima. We're working on a study for a university in the UK looking at anti-Blackness, but also with a specific lens of what that means online, anti-Blackness in Europe.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's already so much to respond to in that. I was thinking, Seyi, when you were talking about the sort of whack-a-mole approach around legislation, and, it's so frustrating how, again, like the tech moves much faster than the legislation ever can. I was listening to the In Machines We Trust podcast, and there was the chief privacy officer from IBM talking about how, so Christina Montgomery, and she was talking about how privacy regulation was that, like, it was so disconnected and disjointed, and now there's like 146 different kinds of regulation, and it makes it really difficult for people to meet that. And particularly, it's easier for big companies to do it and really hard for small companies to do it. So it feels like now, this has been going on too long already, but like, let's not have a whack-a-mole approach to generative AI and the way that's changing the internet, right? Like, please, can we just try to not tread that path again, because we've seen it happen and we've seen how problematic it is. So yeah, I before we go on, I'd really like to just do some sort of like contextualization, and going back to your thing about terminology, Seyi, I'd love it if we could bring a bit of complexity to the term safety. What does that really mean? What does it mean to you? And really, how much of an expansive definition do we need? Because I'm wondering if we need to be going beyond sort of harm mitigation and really moving towards human flourishing as well. And I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I'm looking for something that I say in the very final section of my book on page 232, where I say it more eloquently there and more diplomatically than I'll probably say now. But I just said, look, I hope the book is empowering. I hope it sparks conversations, but I hope that if I'm allowed to revisit this conversation again, maybe there'll be an AI form of books in the future, that we're talking about joy. And that when we see safety, when we see liberation, essentially what we're talking about is liberation, that we center joy and care in that. And women are so at the front of violence online and offline that our time is spread so thinly. It's robbed from us, actually. It's robbed from us to focus only on not dying. to focus only on not being sent a dick pic, to not only be a victim of non-consensual photography, or now you've got AI that can just upload a photo of you and fake it. You've got deep fakes, which is the next report that we're going to be looking at in the autumn. That's what safety means to me. Liberation and joy. That's the expansiveness. Because if we actually frame it and say, how can Black women have joy online? Rah. We're having a different conversation. We're having a different conversation that allows abundance and creativity and resources, because we know that resources are not being allocated to women's safety. In the UK, 0.1% of philanthropy money goes to Black-led organizations. How many of them are doing stuff on tech and women's rights? So few. When we talk about liberation and joy, we also allow for mistakes to happen, and I'd like to see a platform, a tech platform, the new web, whatever that may be, that allows us to have real human conversations and not force, particularly Black women, to continue the stereotype and the myth of strong Black womanhood online. I must be on. I must know everything. When I wake up, I must be a foreign news expert. I must be a domestic expert. I must be a health expert. I must also be an anti-racist expert, and then something on hair and something on food and something about the diaspora wars. Like, it's exhausting. That strong Black womanhood has extended into our online space, and I see Black women not being able to be truly free. That's what I want for an expansive safety term. I want to see safety be, for Black women, be a responsibility of non-Black people, not just Black women. Because if you look at the book, you look at what Ronda said earlier, Black women have been saying this is an issue for 10 years. Before Gamergate, before Trump, we were seeing the organizing and the infiltrating and the pretense of being Black activists online to cause dissent. We know that's how they operate offline. So why would we be surprised that they're doing this online? But yet we're still not believed until it's misinformation about COVID. Then we saw Jack Dorsey, who was then the president of and CEO of Twitter, say, oh, we need to have healthy conversations. It was never healthy for women in the first place. It was never healthy for Black women in the first place. He says we need to be doing nudges around providing real information, but we were not challenging white supremacy ideology online. And that ultimately is it, right? To have Black liberation and Black joy means to have technology that is challenging anti-white supremacy, that is saying that we will no longer be a tool to be weaponized to further the eugenics and to further the division and the racialization of our society. We're going to stop tech being in the hands of perpetuating whiteness, and we're going to say that this is about equality and equity. That for me is when we have a radical conversation about safety. So if anyone is ready to have that, please DM me, because and if you want to troll me, abuse me, don't DM me. But if you're ready to have that conversation, that's where I'm at, because I'm sick of having to convince people that Black women are at harm and at risk online. I want us to be talking about joy. I want us to be talking about radical joy.
Rhonda, do you want to come in and talk about your vision of safety and how expansive it should be?
Sure. I mean, I think Seyi, pretty much said what I would say, but I would add that, one of the things that inspired me very much about what Seyi does is about, like, you can just block and not feel anything about it. And I think that me having that freedom of knowing you don't have to tolerate when people are coming to your house with this, abuse, was liberating, because I think for me, particularly working in the corporate spaces that I have, it's almost assumed that you just grin and bear it. And I think a lot of the bad gender habits that have been ingrained to us are often reproduced online. And for me, I would love to just be who I am, but every time I'm online, I'm thinking, oh, am I going to invite a troll? Am I going to invite abuse in some way, shape, or form? And I would love it, freedom I think you use that word, and that's one of those words that's like not really able to touch. But I think freedom for me is like being able to be who I am and not needing to block people, because people just can be civil. Like civility has gone out the window. And when I think about some of the approaches that might help us get there, apart from all the things that we're already doing, is, at least in the United States, there is no digital citizenship course. You don't learn how to not be a dick online anywhere. You just, if you're like that, you go online and it's amplified because you think the anonymity protects you and empowers you in a way that, meet me outside would not. So I think, having that freedom to be who I want to be online, but then also, pairing that with what does it actually mean to be a digital citizen? And that's why I think, Seyi, your book is such a great starting point for that conversation, because, you want to talk about legislation not keeping up with it. I work in the education sector, and it's like education is not keeping up with it. I turned 40 this year. And when I was coming through school, yes, you had civics. You don't really have that anymore. And civics of yore is not civics of now. And the digital sphere is completely a game changer, constantly shifting. And we are failing future generations by not already having these things in place. So my daughter now, I work in tech, I advocate the use of tech in education, but now that she's able to open her tablet on her own, I'm like, oh gosh, I have to have these conversations with her so she can stay safe online. And it's crazy. It's crazy that we're in this position. So yeah, just plus 1,000 what Seyi said. And I just want to be me when I'm online.
I want to build on Ronda's build and also say we've got similar. Not only are we both realised we're on the continent, on the motherland, but we've also got similar nail polish color, nail color polish. You know what I mean? Safety also being about mental health and about health broadly, but mental health, because what we're seeing is algorithms be fighting and competing for our attention. We see it fighting for our bodily autonomy. We can't make decisions really anymore. We're being nudged and told what to do and how to think and what to feel. And I on the health side, we don't have a relationship. We don't have a good relationship with mental health services in the UK. We don't have enough resources for it. It's underfunded. But we don't have medical professionals helping people who have been victims and survivors of online abuse, people who have got addictions from online. And I think safety has to encompass mental health. It has to encompass that kind of care as well. And on the safety bit, to push it even more, this autonomy of our body, it's so corroded offline and online. Like, poor us, I'm not trying to put us in a victim drama triangle, but poor us that we have to keep up with Roe v. Wade. We have to keep up with the conversations and similar conversations that are being had in the UK, while our body autonomy through tech is also being attacked. So the fact that we have to block people is because people have such poor boundaries, right? That's where digital citizenship and digital self-care comes from, because people don't understand their rights and responsibilities online, but people also don't feel like they can have agency online, that they must be online and give and overshare and not realize that they can decide and change their mind, like they can withdraw consent. And we have a real problem with bodily autonomy being under attack offline that is translating online. And if it's translating and impacting Black women, it is coming for other people too.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on your point about algorithms, nodding to Dr. Safiya Noble with her great book, Algorithms of Oppression, because the thing that has sent me into a tizzy this week is realizing No is showing up in my feed more. I'm having things now come into my feed that I would never normally see. And I'm like, it's happening. And for me with Twitter, Twitter is a Black product because no one was messing with Twitter until Black people made it a thing. And this is facts. And I can't wait for that Black Twitter documentary to come out. And being in this position where now, like, my favorite place online is being corroded, I think was the word you used, Seyi. I just feel sick. And when I noticed that, I'm like writing my friends because I was monitoring as this change happened, the takeover, people thinking Twitter's going to go down. And it's like, oh, no, it's not going down. Now you're just getting content that for me is almost abusive because I'm seeing things that I'm like, I'm even having to question now, is this coming from the perspective that I think it is? And I don't like that because that was my place to mindlessly scroll and be safe. And now it's not. And I'm so mad about it. And so I think that, with what you mentioned about bodily autonomy, I think there's, we have to conceptualize that as well as, what that means in tech, because tech more and more, the lines are being blurred between tech and ourselves. Our mobile phones are already digital extensions of ourselves. So in these online spaces, we're allowing ourselves probably more than in physical spaces to, absorb abuse, absorb things that we would never tolerate for in real life. And yeah, it's as you said, Shay, it's not just the physical, it's the mental health. And obviously we're now seeing an exponential growth in what happens when mental health is not supported and you meet this toxicity online.
It's so true. I relate so much to what you're saying, Rhonda, in terms of feeling really sad about the way that Twitter's changed, because I used to love being on Twitter and now I just almost can't. And I feel like what you're describing in terms of having to constantly figure out, okay, where is this message coming from? What is this a message that comes from the political standpoint, I think? Is it a bot that's pretending to be someone that comes from the political stance, I think? Or is it a different political? It's like so complex that I feel like that's one of the things that puts you in that sort of hyper-vigilant state. And then you're always in like a little bit
fight
of
or flight.
Exactly. You've got cortisol, you've got adrenaline, you're trying to figure it out, you've got information overload, and that's not good for our bodies. And I love in the book, Seyi, how you literally focus on, okay, what does it feel like in your body? How do you react? What happens to your breath? And you share techniques for people to really connect with that, because I feel like we are often not aware of the impacts it has at that kind of like biochemical level, and that's really real, and we have to acknowledge it and honor our bodies.
I think we'll find out in a few years, on top of climate change and all of that tracking the impact of tech and algorithms on our bodies, on burnout. We're seeing a lot of people talk about burnout, and I'm somebody who's in burnout recovery. I took 3 months to leave from Glitch last year to rest and recuperate and to figure out a different relationship with this work. And I see a lot of conversations about burnout, which can be from life, relationships, work, but I too think a part of it is the loss of community through our online spaces, the increased toxicity, as you said, both said, the hypervigilance. And I think we will see the physiological and physical impact of this very soon. And if not on us, definitely on our children.
Yeah. And that's what scares me. And there are, as we know from researchers like Caroline Criado Perez, we know that if there is research being done in this space, it's probably not gender disaggregated, and women may not even be participating. And I think, we're at such an early point in terms of tech and how it's used. And it's like we have, adult technology and infants using it. And I keep using this metaphor because I think that some of the ways that you see digital safety eroded are so juvenile and immature that it just underscores the point. And so how can we pause? Like, you know, you had this letter released about AI and pausing on it, even though there have been so many Black, brown, and even white women warning for a long time about the harms. And I'm like, I think we maybe need a pause, not just on that, but on all of it, and to have a conversation about what it means to be in these powerful positions where you can literally command digital armies. And we do a lot of work to protect our democracies in person. What can we do more to protect our democracy online? Because armies that are being mobilized are not friendly. They are coming in droves to attack. And even what you shared earlier about the current trend on TikTok, it's like, I'm not on TikTok, and I'll admit, like, I'm slow to join these platforms because I like to observe and see what's going down before I wade in there. Like Twitter, I didn't even join it, I think, until like 2010 or 2011, and already it had been a few years. And so I'm always kind of the wait and see perspective. And I think everyone needs to do this because we're getting too far away from, you know, the idea that at the end of the day, these social media are being made for profit, not about me and you being sister friends. It's not about that. So when profit is the motive, already safety is for sale.
And that's so disappointing because it's a choice. It's a choice that they are making. And it's disappointing to see it happen time and time again, that profit is all the changes that we have seen dramatically happen on Twitter have been because of a perceived need for profit. Capitalism, right? And we know capitalism is an extension of slavery and to keep up the exploitation of workers. And if you don't believe me, I highly, highly recommend reading the Bishop of Nat Ministry, Trisha Hersey's book, Rest is Resistance, to understand a healthier relationship with work and technology. And it's disappointing because tech giants, I don't all believe, go into this wanting to make money, at least not 10 years ago, because I don't think anyone knew how much money could be made from tech. I think they did it to be innovative and cool and have status. But the amount of money that is in these industries and the choice they make to still put profit over people, to decide what support and support they're going to provide democracies and governments around elections, what cleanup they will do to make sure that people aren't being spread misinformation that we know disproportionately impacts women candidates and women MPs and women standing for politics or campaigning on women's issues. We know that the choices that tech are making when it comes to profit means they're doing digital connectivity at the expense of digital citizenship, at the expense of safety, and they don't need to make that choice. And I can give you examples of many other industries that now have, through regulation and through education, through consumer or community mobilizing or the consumer market, are having to put safety in mind, even if it's greenwashing once a month for Black History Month or Trans Awareness Month. They are having to stay relevant to their consumers. We know that the automobile industry cannot produce a car without a seatbelt. It cannot produce a car now without thinking about its CO2 emissions. That's the impact that climate change activists over the last 20, 30 years have made to that industry. We know that you can't have a drink. I'm in Egypt right now, so I have a plastic bottle. Don't shoot me. This drink has some form of regulation here in Egypt to make sure that it is actually water and the plastic and the plastic gets recycled. You know, you can't produce beverages and food. It's regulated by the health industry. The hospitality industry is one of the most regulated industries. Travel and tourism. I can go on and on. Our schools, the health system, psychotherapists, but yet tech is the only industry that hasn't been regulated globally around safety. Australia is an example of how you can have an e-safety commissioner, somebody appointed by the government that has governmental leadership that can say, we want innovation, but not at the expense of women, not at the expense of Indigenous communities, not at the expense of Aboriginal communities. We want to make sure that you, particularly smaller platforms, because you made a point, Charlotte, that like bigger platforms can keep up with privacy regulation and keep up with GDPR and data and age verification. That's a conversation. And smaller platforms can't. Australia has shown that it is possible to not have innovation be in conflict with profit. Safety by design means more people are going to be not hesitant to join platforms, like Ronda said. More people are going to don't mind their children being on the platforms if you have safety in mind. We won't buy a car if there's not a seatbelt. So why can't we think about the next Clubhouse, the next house party app, the next TikTok, whatever that may be, and Declaration. I sit on the Global Council of TikTok's Trust and Safety. We don't go on to the next platform, wherever that may be, without asking a series of questions, because we know what it's like when we didn't ask questions about Twitter. And we know what it was like when we didn't ask questions about Clubhouse and about 4chan and about Tattle and all these other platforms. Yeah.
Can we pause a second for an audience question? Because it feels really relevant to what you've just been saying. The question is, are there platforms that you trust more, maybe open source ones? And I'm just wondering whether you feel like there are. Are we in a situation where sort of embracing alternatives is an option? How do you feel about that?
Me personally, I'm gonna say no, because I know a lot of people went to Mastodon, but a lot of toxic people went there too. So it's not the platform, because I think, you know, as Seyi mentioned, like some of these platforms weren't about profit when they started out. And I know Mastodon is not, but then also, you know, there's an assumption that the open source community is one where everything's hunky-dory. And I'm here as a ghost of open source past, where I worked with folks very deeply embedded in this community, but the misogynoir was rife. And so for me, I do not think it has anything to do with the platform in the sense of it being open source. I think the platform would need to have like a community charter, something like what you mentioned, Seyi, with like someone who is responsible and says the buck stops with me, for preventing and mitigating harm on my platform. And to my knowledge, there are not many that actually do that. And I think Mastodon, the architecture and things like that can help and contribute to it. But I've heard stories of toxicity there too. So I don't personally have one that I would say.
I'm unfortunately the same, and I always think, oh, I'm really going to try and answer this question next time I get asked it, and I can't, and I know that we want to be able to have quite clear and binary answers when it comes to safety. Of course, you want to know, am I safe? Yes or no? Where can I go? I totally get it. It's oh, hello, Kitty. It's activating our nervous system. I get it. What is safe for one person is not safe for another. That's what I would say is the way to go about answering that question. Asking yourself, and it's prompts in the book, why are you online? What are you trying to get? Ronda was talking about she's online for community. She's not on. She's online for community. She's not online to be an influencer or a blogger. So Ronda's interactions online is different. So ask yourself, why are you online? What values? Where do you want to be? Who do you want to be connecting? Who do you want to be learning with? And use that as a framework to decide where you want to be online and how you want to be online. It's the same as cars. It's the same for sweets, food. You know, I don't want us to get to the point where we are regulating people's choices. I want digital citizenship, and I want digital self-care, and I want this book, and I want these conversations to spark agency in women who have been told they don't have agency offline and online. Because if I sit here and tell you a recommended list of platforms and it's not safe for you, that's me disappointing you. That's me putting you in harm's way. That is not my role. My role is to push you, to support you in our workshop, is to guide you to think about, what do I need right now? And knowing that you can change your mind as you evolve as a human being when it comes to being online spaces. And I want to underline something that Ronda said about open source community. The word open source has such a good PR, unlike tech companies, but open source, and the role that I have played at Glitch, when it was a campaigning organization and then became a charity 3 years ago, I sit between the women's sector and I sit between the tech sector. And I have to spend my time lobbying the tech sector to care about gender rights and understand that digital rights and gender rights are one of the same. And I have to help the women's sector, or support the women's sectors, to understand that you can't ignore tech. Tech is impacting the offline space. So the open source, with all the amazing ethical intention in the world, it's hugely dominated by white men. And so whiteness and white supremacy, when unchallenged, when not having those uncomfortable conversations, when not front and center of the work, means you end up perpetuating and causing harm. That's why I can't make that recommendation. And I, when forced, would say each platform has different pros and cons. So Pinterest have done a lot to understand their role in Molly Russell's death by suicide. For those that don't know, Google it in your own time. I don't want us to go into it too much because it is a horrific case, but Pinterest was one of the platforms that basically fed suicide ideation to a young girl under the age of 16. So Pinterest also have to, a lot of gymmers. And if we had time, we could talk about how the gym community, the health community online, that is one step to being groomed by the far right and conspiracy theorists, because it's all about health, body, superiority with your body, eugenics, all of that. They are constantly targeted and have algorithms against them. Why did I go off on that tangent? Molly Russell, Pinterest. They had to work on their policy position on body shaming and on fat phobia. They've had to really work on that. Pinterest, right? I would say up until Elon Musk, Twitter was doing a lot to have tools to make it that you could be safe online. We were building and having such momentum. We had a hateful conduct policy be adopted by Twitter that included people from multi-intersecting identities. We were making such headway, and then it all changed. So I don't know what could have happened in the last 49 minutes of us being on this call. We might have a new prime minister, and we don't know if Musk is CEO of Twitter. So I'm sorry to not be able to answer it, but I hope I'm not giving you a politician's answer.
Totally. Yeah, I did want to talk about Twitter specifically. It takes a lot of energy to follow exactly what's happening moment by moment. And, lots has happened since Musk took over. And actually that takeover was one of the things that sparked us wanting to have this conversation months ago. Where do you think the platform is now in terms of safety? What do you want to see happen?
Well, I just think it's nowhere. I think I'm still there. And, after I, noticed what I did about the algorithm and what was being served into the For You, I just fear that it's going to get worse before it gets better. Having the removal of two-factor authentication. So having worked in the mobile industry, I know that, yes, there are alternatives and you can do other things, but most people do it with their enable two-factor authentication with their mobile phones. So it seems so sinister for that to be one of the main things that went, even before the blue tick went, that went. And I felt like that was a critical safety feature in terms of, preventing hacks and things of that nature. I would say the verification thing has also run amok. Like, I was never verified. So Seyi, I would love to hear your experience with that, because, it is something where, yeah, we saw the chaos and the mayhem, and it was he cute when it's like corporates, but when it's real people, if real people are getting verified as other people, I can easily see how that would go wrong with, spurned, spouses or partners who want to ruin someone's life. So I think everything that I've seen, everything that people have been warning about, I thought it was alarmist, but increasingly I just don't see it that way. And I think, I'm on LinkedIn and I like it, but, because of Black Twitter, I was specifically on Twitter for that reason. So it pains me because, unfortunately, because of history, Black people don't have the tools or the means to create their own platform for us, by us. And while there were platforms in the past, like MySpace, that we did actually make our own, I don't know that there is something else like that out there. And it hurts, because I see that my people have built something so incredible that, governments, people, VIPs are there because we made it such a thing. And so to see that taken away is heartbreaking. But as I said, I'll pass to Seyi, because she had a blue check mark. I don't know if you still have it, and then what the impacts have been for you.
I'm due to lose my blue tick if I don't pay a ransom of a monthly subscription by the 20th of April. And having to do an assessment around that. What does that mean? It's a very frustrating and live conversation. It'd be really interesting to see how celebrities and those with a lot more social cultural capital than me will respond. So taking a step back, Glitch and I were invited to be part of Twitter's Trust and Safety Council in 2020, and we had made slowly, frustratingly, but slow progress on that, and connecting and formalizing the process, making sure it wasn't a dynamic of tokenizing, of informed involvement of everything. Like, we spent a lot of time not just around what we did, but how we did it, to find out in December that we were disbanded 48 hours before we were meant to have a meeting that was already postponed, and a meeting in good grace and in our values. We said, okay, let's have someone come to this meeting and explain to us what's going on before any decision around leaving or whatever. And what we hear here, because there's no transparency anymore, there's less transparency, I should say. What we hear is that Elon Musk then heard about some people boycotting and what the meeting was, and we were disbanded. So 2 years of hard graft and work to make the platform what it was globally by activists, people who are trusted flaggers to flag accounts to help teach the algorithms about nuances in language that's not just English. All of that work was undone like that. And I get really upset, because I'm someone that offers optimism in my team. I'm someone that offers optimism and hope when I do panels. But December 2022, I think I hit a professional rock bottom around advocacy and working with tech. That took me a long time to think about a new relationship with tech, for it to just go like that. The disposability politics of it all, the tech layoffs, the sensationalizing around Elon Musk. I am so disappointed by certain journalists reporting constantly of whistleblower news. And I think it cheapens whistleblowers who put their lives on the line to share what's going on by now having some backdoor happening through, a white media outlet reporting on Elon Musk's every move. It sensationalizes and makes this about a man, and makes this about him as an individual, rather than the systemic issues that meant that Elon Musk could even buy the platform and do what he has done. It takes away from the shareholders' responsibility. And the Trust and Safety Council wasn't the only oversight that was disbanded. The actual board of, not the shareholders, but the board of Twitter. For that to happen, for that honestly to happen, how can we be making this a conversation just about Elon Musk? We have to be looking at the systemic ways and the capitalist ways in which that has happened, and he's been able to get away with it. And that the only thing that seems to be working for him is when Tesla's profits started getting was in jeopardy of the way he was acting online. Money was the only thing that spoke to him. That is absolutely sad, that we've allowed our creative platforms, our expression of ourselves, to be so monopolized and colonized, actually.
Colonized.
Colonized. Like this. Oh, Charlotte, it disappoints me. Ronda, it deflates me.
Yeah, I hear you, Seyi, and I feel like the issue of hype is really coming to the fore more and more, right? The way in which hype around particularly generative AI is shaping the narrative in a way that obscures all of the problems that it imparts on society. It's I think quite unprecedented. We often see hype around tech products, but like this is really, really significant. And I think that's the context of the letter from the institute that came out, that Elon Musk signed about, let's have a moratorium on AI, because it does so much to deflect from what's happening now. So can we take another moment, because we have lots of audience questions coming in. So, and a couple of them actually on a slightly different tangent are really about being the producers of content, and what considerations do we need to make when we are holding spaces for other people or putting out stuff online. So the first one is whether there's any thoughts or guidance, and there is a lot in the book, about how to produce online content, which is either personal content or content that's for a wider audience, in a respectful way.
I think you've got to define respect in the first place for yourself. To be honest, people's tolerance and the definitions of respect or public debate or freedom of expression is so warped. So I think you have to define that for yourself. If you're wanting inclusive spaces, you want people to be able to provide challenge and call in without it being personal. Defining what do you mean. Do a mood board about it if you want, or do a Google Jamboard if that's the tech version of it. But I think you need to unpack what you mean by respect. What do you mean by inclusivity, to then know how your guidelines follow from that. And don't overcomplicate it because the word online or the word tech is in there. Take it out and be like, okay, how would you want inclusive, respectful spaces offline? The same thing applies online. I don't know if it's like maths. Like when people think about maths and numbers, they just go, oh, what's 2 + 2? And I think when we put the word online or digital, people are like, oh my God, I think I don't know how to use the internet. Like, I think it puts an unnecessary pressure on it, and an overthinking, and a great intention, but an overthinking. I talk about in the book about the importance of having intentions and values. Why are you online, and what do you hope to achieve? Are you an educational platform that is trying to challenge white supremacy? Are you an educational platform that is trying to provide guidance to parents? Are you making money on the platform and you are a business? Are you somebody that's trying to grow a platform to have a lot of following, to be an influencer? All of those have different considerations around how you're going to show leadership and model digital citizenship on your platforms, because I see a lot of influencers who are happy for people to be called out and abused and stuff in their comments because it's all engagement. It's all in the name of engagement. And no, actually, no, you have a responsibility to make sure you are content moderating on your own platforms. I think there's really good Reddit groups and forums that have good content moderating, community guidelines, principles that I think could be used. I think a lot of principles around respecting people's bodily autonomy, informed consent. I think there's radical ways to be thinking about community guidelines as well, that it's not just about being free from safety, but like I said before, what would a community guideline look like if we were centering Black joy and Black liberation online? We would come up with something completely different.
And I guess to add to what Seyi said, I think one way to start, and I liked specifically when you said remove the online, because whether it's online or offline, it should be the same. And I think as someone with a disability, universal design has been one of those things that, when I look at the WCAG guidelines for designing things online, a lot of the instructional kind of guidance about that are things that I think we can, adapt and apply for, any online space, whether that's, web documents or even a social media platform. And certainly defining, what the terms mean, but then also, identifying members, because I think, as I increasingly see, there are just some people who do not need to be online. And I think that, as much as we talk about freedom, there's freedom to say things, but that doesn't mean freedom from consequences. And so being, American by birth, but British by residence, I marvel because I'm like, wow, they're like, these people are now being jailed for that. And it's like, for me, that was eye-opening, because in the US, you would never get any kind of punishment for anything you said or did online. In fact, when I first started working in diversity, equity, and inclusion in 2009 in Boston, I want to say that year there were like 5 girls in a year that had hanged themselves from bullying they were receiving on social media. And so it was my job to kind of go in schools and do youth work. Often these were girls from diverse backgrounds. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like, why is no one talking about, maybe some people who do these things or contribute to it just simply should not be online. But then you have, the principles of abolition. Like, so do we create another structure like this? And I don't know the answer, because some of the things that I've seen online and that I know other people have personally or indirectly experienced, for me, I'm like, just ban them forever. But as you probably know well, Shay, it's often very hard to ban a troll. So how do you navigate a space where, you have a lot of people in the United States that are on True Social? And I think that the thing I'm hoping for is, indirect ways of kind of putting some pause on this. So like, I think the Fox News Dominion lawsuit, like the way that this is unearthing just how much Fox lies to its TV audience. And then this audience is very often online, contributing to abuse from these viewpoints. It's like, will this be a way to kind of slow the momentum of toxicity? I don't know, but I'm hoping it will be, because more people are now kind of having a conversation around like, oh, I believe this because I saw it on Fox News. And now we know they're kind of basically saying we're yokels, we're nobodies in the background, and we'll believe anything and this will sell, So I think we have to get creative. We have to think outside the box. And it's funny because with all the AI in the world and the algorithms being so intelligent, look at the mess we're in.
Chaos. The planned chaos.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's another one of the reasons why the hype is so problematic, because they're framed as being, artificial general intelligence. But as you say, we're in a right mess.
They haven't fixed anything.
Yeah, they haven't fixed anything. They cause a huge amount of problems just by being pattern recognition machines, right? It's quite extraordinary. Rhonda, in your work, you focus so much on data. And you know, we know that that has lots of potential for positively impacting society, but also we know that it can increase inequalities and systemic forms of oppression.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really curious about what your hopes are around the role that sort of like data, big data plays in this safety space, particularly as, you know, we continue to see sort of all kinds of forms of data exploding in scale and proliferation online. Have we lost Rhonda for a second?
Oh no.
No, Rhonda, don't go. Okay. Well, whilst we reconnect with Rhonda, Seyi, shall I ask you one more audience question?
Sure.
What are the most common threats to online safety?
God, mate, how long do you have?
I know.
I think the easiest way to answer this because of time is understanding that online abuse, online violence, online harms, online gender-based violence, I feel like are umbrella terms for different types of tactics, but the thing they have in common is to incite fear, is to attack your autonomy and your agency, and to dehumanize you. That's what I see as a thread. And so that looks like right now, like I said earlier, deep fakes, and where people are faking women's faces and images on pornographic content that is not with their consent, that impacts democracy. That tends to be of MPs and politicians, and also of celebrities. People are not sure what's, you know, fake, what's not anymore, which is good that people are critical thinking, is this true? But that it causes a lot of confusion and hysteria, and that has a psychological impact. I think there's real threats of hacking and impersonation, and people doing things in the name of memes. So you tend to see that Diane Abbott, who in the UK is the first Black woman MP and former Shadow Home Secretary. Yay, Rhonda's back. She often has parody accounts, and it's parody because it's in the name of comedy. And actually, going back to deep fakes, there's a TV show that I can't believe passed the appropriate TV regulation, and gives me concerns, because that same person that is meant to regulate TV shows are going to be regulating social media companies. There's a show that is in the name of comedy and parody, but it's deep fakes. It's actors and actresses pretending to be the likes of Kim Kardashian and Adele, and doing these fake storylines, and they get away with it by saying it's comedic content. That's concerns me, because that normalizes the misuse, I think, of tech, and I think it desensitized people to that lack of consent and autonomy over your data and your body. And it really concerns me, because no learnings have been applied to the apologies post Black Lives Matter around certain comedians realizing that blackface wasn't funny and things like that, but yet they are happy to do that with tech and online, and are saying things about, you know, it's preserving the arts and stuff like that. I was like, the arts don't need preserving like that. You know what the arts need? Funding. The arts need core cash. They don't need you playing around with people's faces and bodies and getting them to do things. I think those are the most common threats that I can talk about without taking another hour of all of your time, and allowing you to see, because I can say something now and then a new tactic and a new way of dehumanizing happens, because as we're talking and organizing and getting clarity, the enemy. And this is warfare, because, you know, Audre Lorde, bless her, she uses the word warfare when she talks about self-care being a revolutionary act. When we got others on the other side of this war organizing as well, we are keeping up with their tactics, right? And we often see their tactics being played out on Black women, and then Black women, then it becomes mainstreamed. So we saw blackface happening and impacting Black women. No one said nothing, but now it's impacting those. Now it's impacting non-Black women. Oh, it's a concern. Anyway, I go off on a tangent to say, because Zoom bombing didn't exist pre-COVID, right? Even though folks in the global south were raising alarms about the privacy issue and the safety issue, that it wasn't listened to. New tactics and can be created. And what I tried to do to try and make this content, because as I was writing it, the conversations about Elon Musk was happening. So I was like, oh my God, is the book going to be outdated before it even comes out? I tried to get people to see it, that online abuse should be a framework in how we see behaviors and how we can make sure we're checking with our body, with our principles and our values, that what's happening here is not okay, or what's happening here to that individual who's more at risk then another individual is not okay. Thinking about how we have digital equity and efficacy when it comes to our platform, asking permission to quote, tweet and retweet things when you know that you're an influencer or celebrity that gets a lot of abuse, gets a lot of what ifs, and you're amplifying your platform, yes, to your million followers, but that means your million followers of supporters and just pure haters, making sure that smaller accounts, smaller organizations and individuals are up for that. It's that kind of conversation around joy and safety, as I said before, but that dehumanizing lens that we should be looking out for.
Thank you so much, Seyi. That was an amazingly comprehensive answer. So it was like a deceptively simple question, but so complicated. Rhonda, before we lost you for a second, I was asking you about the role of data in digital safety. Did you catch the question?
I did, but with ADHD, I already forgot it. So if you wouldn't mind repeating.
Yeah, so of course. Yeah. So I was just, reflecting on how much of your work focuses on data. And I was wondering what your hopes are for the ways in which data could inform practices around digital safety. What do you see the role of this? Because with large language models and everything, like data is proliferating at so much scale and speed. I wonder how that's changing for you.
I mean, right now I'm working with data.org, and it's been such a journey to find an employer where, as a Black woman in tech, I can feel safety, particularly psychological safety. And I've been here now for a year and a quarter, and I have that. And it's like, I didn't jinx it, because normally I'll say that in the first 3 months, and then the next 3 months it's like, oh damn girl, it's all the same. And I think part of what has helped being in this role is because in our mission is that we have to be intersectional in the work that we do. We have to put those who are traditionally last first. And so in my role right now, which is recently evolved, I'm going to be responsible for digital learning, but then also like helping to generate our curricula. And our curricula is going to be doing things differently. So one of the biggest problems in terms of data digital safety is that we don't have enough Timnit Gimbrus in the room. We don't have enough Sophia Nobles in the room, whether it's creating these models, having the ethical discussions about them, curating the data that is used to create, these digital products and services that expose us to harm. And the work that I lead is to make sure that there are other Rondas, there are other Sheyis, there are other Charlottes that are there. So we prioritize, women, people from different castes, people who identify as women, people who are in low and middle income countries, and all of these groups, these different identities, of course, many of which are intersecting, you just don't see them with a seat at the table. And I have to speak specifically to people who identify as women and people who identify as trans in particular, because when you talk about safety online, the Black trans people are absolutely getting it the absolute worst. And the more that continues to happen in this space in the UK, I don't follow it as much, but what I'm seeing in the United States is so disturbing to me. And you shouldn't have to have a family member who identifies in this manner for you to care that any kind of threat to a person's online or physical bodily integrity is not okay. And so what we're doing and what we're working very hard to do is to provide skills to train people up so that they can participate in these conversations. And I think that more than just a seat at the table, we want people to create another sitting mechanism altogether, because what we have seen is just people learning to reproduce, whether wittingly or not, the same harm that they themselves would want to protect themselves from. And so we're doing this by being radical in our curriculum. Like a lot of the work and the philosophies that are guiding my implementation are informed by Black feminist theory. So Seyi, I'm like, yes, Audre Lorde, Rest is Revolutionary is one of my ministries, and the NAP ministry, things like this. I'm putting that in my work because I know that if we want to do things differently, we have to produce people who are thinking differently, people who actually care about the intersection of data and digital safety, and that can challenge this horrible system that has just, quite frankly, run amok. And so, I'm hoping, particularly within the next 2-3 years, as we develop these curricula, and we have incredible partners, including with historically Black colleges and universities, Indian universities that are serving people who come from different castes, the ones that have traditionally not been very included in that context. Our work with partners in South America and also in Africa, also making sure we go above and beyond for women to be more participants in these spaces. So I feel like I'm doing my part, and I'm just grateful to be in an organization that empowers me to be myself at work for I feel like the first time ever, and I'm nearly 40. So being able to have that and just now using that joy that I find in doing something I love and making sure that other people can be in this space and helping to make change in their own way.
Thank you so much. It's so important, isn't it, that you are able to be in an environment that feels, safe for you to do what you need to do. And I know, Seyi, you've created an amazing culture at Glitch where people, show up as themselves at work, and it's like a very caring space. And I think that's one of the other things that I really admire about, it's not only the work that you do, but it's the culture that you create around work. So, high five for that also. I really wanted to ask you, Seyi, about something in the book that really spoke to me, which was around accountability, actually, because I found it really helpful the way that you highlighted a sort of a culture of accountability that can sometimes be used as an excuse to abuse people, like digging up through old tweets and stuff and then shaming people, stuff like that. And I feel that one of the things that can make one feel unsafe is the fear of, okay, like I might be called out, I might get things wrong, everyone's going to make mistakes, we know that we're going to do that. And it feels like there's a really delicate balance between holding ourselves and others accountable whilst not tipping over into the more problematic sort of underbelly of that same practice. And I'd love to hear any thoughts you wanted to share about that and how you wrote about it in the book.
Thank you. Yeah, accountability's been a constant reflection of mine. I think it cuts across a lot of the stuff that I've been interested in my career, standing for politics, going to Brussels to work on youth rights, setting up Glitch was to hold governments, local council, now tech policies to account for the standard in which I think people should be able to flourish on Earth, in life. And I constantly reflect on accountability for myself as a growing CEO in an organization that's growing. And one of the things that I try and hold myself and Glitch accountable to is how we do our work. If we really want to make change, the master's tools is not going to dismantle what we're doing. We have to work slowly. We have to work intentionally. Two things that are opposite to how tech companies particularly work, but also in the capitalist market. We have to center the well-being, radical candor, honesty, and unlearn the fear around failure. And I think it's through building accountability mechanisms and making mistakes at Glitch and, you know, calling myself a recovering dickhead for all the things I've had to unlearn and relearn, that I think I saw the lack of accountability in our communities online, the way you would at least have some accountability offline. I saw accountability missing also when I have parents come to book events, and I do this because I'm imitating the fear and the energy they come with, like, how do I keep my child safe online? And I'm just like, that's a deeper issue. That's an offline issue, in that you think, sole parent, you have to be the only one responsible for your child's safety online. It takes it takes a village. Look at me clapping and then I don't land properly. It takes a village to raise a child. And yet we put it on the parents, usually the mother, to now be maths whiz, do take them to karate, clean children's bums, and they're sick because kids are always getting sick. I live between 7 primary schools and secondary schools, and it's just like sickness is in the air. And then now you want them to be an expert on 4chan and on Gamecraft or FIFA or whatever. Like, I can't even keep up on playing on the PlayStation with my boyfriend, let alone now understanding chat rooms and all of that. And I feel like we've missed accountability in our village. We've missed accountability in our feminist movements, offline as well as online. And that we've now taken the tactics of vigilante justice into our own hands. And I understand why that is, because we can't trust law enforcement. We can't trust tech companies. So I understand why people feel that they need to do vigilante justice. But I think when you're doing it on individuals, and I use an example in the book about the person who one of the people who were racist online after the 2020 Euros towards Black players. And I said, what use did it do to now say the guy's full name and where he worked as if he doesn't have family? And we now send him into a shame spiral of embarrassment and fear than actually being held responsible and accountable for his decisions and seeing behavioral change. That's what we want to do. Don't get me wrong, vigilante justice feels right. And sometimes it's necessary. I'm not a pacifist. I may believe in abolition, but I'm not a pacifist. Sometimes you need to have vigilante justice, but it's the idea that we don't have accountability framework. So our only tool keeps being vigilante justice, keeps being council culture, in the sense of the fear that people can't say things and make mistakes. We have created perfectionism online. And perfectionism, and I always give a shout out to Martha Owajobi, who is the founder and CEO of JMB Consultancy and BAME Online, that is all about how to do fundraising for an anti-capitalist and anti-racist lens, who sent me an article, and I can send the link shortly, around white supremacy culture and organizations. And one of the tenets is what? Perfectionism. So when we're demanding perfectionism of ourselves and of each other, in our movements, in our community groups, in our villages, in our parenting, we are perpetuating white supremacy. We are not humanizing people. No one is perfect. It's fallible. And I wrote about this like 3-4 years ago, with how much we heroize our feminist leaders and then pull them up on this pedestal and wait for them to fuck up. Me and my friend Martha, she's on this with me on this work trip. We're like, I wonder if we're gonna get cancelled this year, because we're just like, it's gonna come, you know. And we're like, we wonder where it's gonna be, because people love you one minute and they hate you, and we see the exact same thing about in tabloid media as well. That is just spreading to social media. So accountability is so important. Why are we calling that person in? Is that to feel better about ourselves? Is that to have dominion? We were talking about bell hooks earlier, weren't we? Bell hooks talks about that's not love. If we're going to have a revolution, it has to be in love. And people think that having domination over people is love. That's not accountability. Let me find the quote that Mariam Hasna says that I love so bloody much. I won't swear, but I did just swear, didn't I? I didn't say the hardest. But she says something like, Are you asking for accountability, or are you trying to dysregulate someone's nervous system to feel better about yourself?
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, and you know what? Speaking of bell hooks, I also had a quote that I really love that speaks to this, and it's how do we hold people accountable for wrongdoing and yet at the same time remain in touch with their humanity enough to believe in their capacity to be transformed?
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's a good one, isn't it? I feel like that really helps.
And it's not easy, right? Because people will drive you to the edge.
It's not easy. It's not easy. And Black women are really good at giving that grace at the expense of themselves. Yeah. They are because they know that they just, I speak for myself. Ronda knows that what would it have been? August 2021. I was talking to you about having burnout and how I was giving graciousness to people that didn't deserve graciousness. They weren't showing me a teachable spirit. That's how you work out how to apply that quote, because if you're hoping that by giving grace to all of these people, it's going to come back to you. No, you give yourself the grace. You give yourself that love. That's what Bell Hooks talks about.
Totally. I'm really conscious of time. We've only got like 3 or 4 minutes left. Thank you both so much. I mean, I always learn from you, and this has been no exception. It's been absolutely amazing and such a pleasure. I know that there will be a lot of people watching who would love to support you, to support your organizations or your projects. So what would be the best way for people to do this?
Great. So from my side, and someone's ringing at me, so I'll take the phone off the dial. If you want to stay up on a lot of the things that are coming out in terms of innovations, both for and by women and those that aren't, subscribe to our Gender and Mobiles newsletter. We only produce it every 2 months because, yes, that rest is revolutionary. And it's like a labor of love because we see these articles that have provoked thoughts for us and just lead us to question as we comment on them, our thoughts and ideas about them. So I think that would be great. And then I'll say also, because I'm one of the owners, to buy Seyi's book, because it was amazing for me to read from someone that I admire so much, and just to be able to apply lessons that have been invaluable in the past few months.
100%.
Totally appreciate that. I've popped a link. I'm going to be really honest. We're in global economic uncertainty and turbulence. And right now, what Glitch needs is to have the ability to rely on our community financially. And that can look like being set up as a regular donor as little as £3 a month, and just people thinking about how they can fundraise for us, how they can do community events. That would be really important to us, because we know that global uncertainty means the philanthropy sector closes even more. It causes a scarcity mindset and all sorts of stuff. And we're good, but I'm not waiting till we're not good for us to start seeing that people join for as little as £3 a month, so that we can be able to make decisions around unrestricted funding with what we want to do, like that misogynoir report, because a lot of funders did not believe in this report. They believed in a report.
I can't believe they wouldn't.
A lot of funders would believe in a women's report, a women of color report, but a Black women report, how dare they? And that has come from unrestricted money and fundraising. And so we need our community with support. So that would be the best thing through our website, please.
Amazing. Well, I will encourage everyone to please support all of these fantastic projects and all of this amazing work. And thank you again both so much. I've really enjoyed it. It's been amazing.
Thank you for the invitation, Charlotte. It was so good to connect with all of you last year and now be here doing this. Really, really grateful.
Me too. Promise me we'll do this again next year.
Yes.
It's a deal. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here.
Have a good night, a good evening, morning,
everyone.
afternoon.
Bye.
Ciao.